In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. The Torah speaks of a king whose wisdom made nations bow, yet whose heart was tested by power beyond imagination. The Bible describes Solomon as the ruler who was given unmatched authority, wealth, and dominion, yet warns how even the wisest can slip when surrounded by power. And the Quran reveals something deeper. It tells us that Solomon was not just a king. He was a prophet, a servant, a man who controlled winds, commanded jinn, spoke to animals, and yet bowed his head in humility before God. 3 books, 1 message. Power is never just a blessing. It is always a test. Before we begin, if you are someone who seeks truth beyond surface-level stories, then this journey is for you. Stay till the end, because what you are about to hear is not just history. It is a mirror of our world today. This is not just the story of Solomon. This is the story of what happens when a man is given everything. And what happens after he is gone. Imagine a kingdom so vast that the wind itself obeys its king. A throne that is not carried by men, but by unseen forces. Armies not just of humans, but of jinn and birds and creatures that most people cannot even comprehend. This was not mythology. This was reality. Solomon stood at a level of power no king before him had ever reached. But here is the question that history whispers again and again. Was it power that defined him? Or was it how he carried it? From a young age, Suleman AS was not ordinary. He was the son of David, a prophet and king himself. A man known for justice, strength, and deep connection with Allah. But Solomon was different. Where Dawood AS was known for strength and voice, Solomon was known for understanding. The Quran tells us about a moment that reveals everything. 2 people came with a dispute. A field had been destroyed by sheep. David gave a judgment. But Solomon, even as a young man, saw deeper. He gave a different ruling. And God says that he gave Suleman understanding. This was the beginning, not of a king, but of a mind that could see beyond what others saw. But understanding alone does not make a legend. Power does. And the power that Solomon was given was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Allah granted him control over the wind. Not a metaphor, not poetry, real control. The wind would carry him and his armies across vast distances in a fraction of time. Journeys that would take months were reduced to moments. Think about that. In a world where even kings struggled with distance, Solomon ruled over it. But that was only the beginning. He was given authority over the jinn, creatures of smokeless fire, beings that humans cannot see, beings that have their own will, their own strength, their own nature. And yet, they were placed under his command. They built for him palaces, statues, massive structures that human hands alone could not achieve. They dived into the oceans. They brought treasures from depths no human could reach. And all of it was under his control. But perhaps the most fascinating gift of all was something that many overlook. He could understand the language of animals, birds, insects, creatures that humans pass by without a second thought. To Solomon they spoke, and he listened. There is a moment that defines this gift. As his army marched, a tiny ant saw them approaching. It warned its colony, "Enter your homes, lest Suleman and his army crush you without even realizing." Suleman heard it. He did not laugh in arrogance. He smiled, and then he made a prayer. He asked Allah to allow him to be grateful. Think about that, a king with control over wind, jinn, and armies. And what moves him? A tiny ant. This is where the real story begins. Because power did not make him arrogant. It made him more aware, more careful, more grateful. But every gift carries a hidden trial. And the greater the gift, the greater the test. One day, Suleman is inspected his army. Everything was in order. Humans were present. Jinn were present. Birds were present. But one bird was missing. The hudhud. A small bird. Insignificant in the eyes of most. But not to Solomon. He noticed. He questioned. And he warned. If the hudhud does not have a valid reason, it will face punishment. Soon, the hudhud returned. And what it brought would change everything. It spoke of a kingdom. A powerful land. A wealthy civilization. Ruled by a queen who had everything. But worshipped the sun instead of Allah. This was not just information. This was a test. For Solomon, for the queen, and for the future of an entire region. Suleman AS did not rush into war. He did not let power blind him. Instead, he sent a message. A letter. Simple. Clear. Do not exalt yourselves against me. Come to me in submission. This moment is critical, because it shows something rare. Power with restraint. Authority with patience. The queen received the letter. She was not foolish. She consulted her advisors. She analyzed the situation. She understood that this was no ordinary king. And here, history pauses. Because what happens next is not just about two rulers. It is about two systems. Two ways of thinking. Two paths. One based on divine guidance. The other based on worldly power. But before we move forward, understand this. Everything Solomon had was not permanent. Because no power on earth is. And that is where the real test begins. Not when you gain power. But when you are surrounded by it. When everything obeys you. When nothing challenges you. When you begin to believe that this is yours. The letter had been sent. A message unlike any other. No threats of destruction. No display of arrogance. Just a call. Do not rise against me. Come in submission. The Queen of Saba sat in silence after hearing it. She was not weak. She ruled a powerful kingdom. Her people were loyal. Her army was strong. Her wealth was unmatched in her region. But something about this message unsettled her. It did not sound like the voice of a typical king. It carried weight, authority, certainty. She turned to her advisors. They were men of war. Men of strength. They responded as expected. We are powerful. We are ready. The decision is yours. But she hesitated. Because she understood something that many rulers fail to see. War is easy to start. But impossible to control once it begins. She made a decision that would define her legacy. Instead of rushing into battle, she chose wisdom. She would send a gift. A test. Caravans were prepared. Gold, jewels, precious items. A display of wealth meant to impress. Or perhaps to distract. Or maybe even to measure the man she was dealing with. The gift arrived before Suleman AS. For any other king, this would have been a moment of pride. A confirmation of superiority. A chance to accept tribute. But Suleman AS was not like other kings. He looked at the gifts. And then he spoke words that shattered the entire purpose of that offering. Do you provide me with wealth? What Allah has given me is better than what He has given you. This was not arrogance. This was clarity. Because his power did not come from gold. It came from something far beyond it. He returned the gift. Not only that, he sent a warning. If they do not come in submission, he would come with forces they could not resist. Forces that would humble them. This was the turning point. The queen now understood. This was not a man who could be bought. Not a ruler who could be manipulated. not a king who measured success by wealth. So she made her move. She decided to go herself. To see, to understand, to witness this king with her own eyes. And this is where one of the most astonishing moments in history unfolds. Before the queen even began her journey, Suleman AS turned to his assembly. He asked a question: who can bring me her throne before they arrive? Think about this moment. A throne, a symbol of power, a massive structure, located miles away in a distant land. And he asks for it to be brought before her arrival. A powerful jinn stepped forward. He said he could bring it before Suleman AS could rise from his place. Fast, but still within the limits of physical movement. Then another voice spoke, a man who had knowledge of the book. He said something that defied all understanding. I will bring it to you before your glance returns to you. And in that instant, it was done. The throne appeared, right before Solomon's, not transported over hours, not carried across land, but brought in a moment that human minds struggle to comprehend. And what was Suleman's reaction? Did he celebrate his power? Did he boast? Did he claim greatness? No, he said something that reveals the true nature of this story. This is from the reward of my Lord to test me. Will I be grateful or ungrateful? Pause here, because this is everything. Most people, when given power, believe it is proof of their greatness. Solomon saw it as a test. He ordered that the throne be slightly altered. Not completely changed, just enough, so that when the queen arrived, a question could be asked. Soon, the queen reached his kingdom. She saw things she had never seen before. Structures beyond imagination, order beyond comprehension, a system that did not rely on chaos. Then she was asked, "Is your throne like this?" She looked, she analyzed, she thought, and then she gave an answer that shows her intelligence. It is as though it is the same. She did not rush, she did not deny. She recognized something deeper. But the real moment was yet to come. She was invited into the palace. And what she saw next would shake her understanding of reality. The floor appeared to be water. Clear, flowing. She thought it was a pool. So she lifted her dress slightly to step through. But it was not water. It was glass, perfectly transparent, flawless. A level of craftsmanship beyond anything she had seen. At that moment, something shifted inside her. This was not just power. This was something else. And then came the realization. The truth she could no longer ignore. She said, "My Lord, I have wronged myself. And I submit with Suleman to Allah, the Lord of all worlds." This was the victory, not of armies. Not of wealth, but of truth. A queen who had everything. Power, wealth, authority. And yet, she chose submission. But the story does not end here. Because while this was a moment of triumph, it also marked the peak. The highest point of Solomon's kingdom. And history teaches us something very important. Every peak is followed by a test. Because maintaining power is harder than gaining it. And what happens after a great ruler leaves is often more important than what happens during his rule. The queen had submitted. Truth had prevailed. A kingdom that once bowed to the sun now bowed to God. And Suleman AS stood at the peak of power that no king before or after would ever truly match. He had everything. Control over wind. Command over jinn, authority over vast lands, wisdom that guided rulers, respect that crossed borders. But here is the reality that most people ignore. The higher the rise, the more silent the final test becomes. Because not all tests come in the form of enemies. Some come in the form of endings. Time passed. The kingdom flourished. Justice prevailed. Systems were established. Balance was maintained. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But the greatest truth of this world is simple. No matter how powerful you are, your time is limited. And then came the moment that no army could stop. No power could delay. No authority could command away. The moment of death. Suleman AS stood, leaning on his staff. A king in his palace. A prophet in his final moment. And then, quietly, without chaos, without noise, his soul was taken. But something unusual happened. Something that reveals one of the deepest lessons of this story. His body remained standing, supported by his staff. The Jinn continued their work. They were still building, still serving, still laboring under his command. Because they did not know. Think about that. Creatures of immense power. Beings made of smokeless fire. Yet they did not know that the man they were obeying was no longer alive. Days passed, maybe longer, and they continued, unaware, until a small, almost insignificant event changed everything. A creature of a termite, it began to eat the staff. Slowly, silently, until finally, the staff weakened. And then it broke, and the body of Suleman fell. In that moment, everything was revealed. The Jinn realized the truth. If they had known the unseen, they would not have remained in that humiliating work. This is not just an ending. This is a message. The illusion of control shattered in an instant. A king who commanded the wind. A prophet who controlled the unseen. A ruler whose authority shaped nations. And yet, his death came quietly, without announcement, without resistance. This is the reality of power. No matter it becomes, it is always temporary. But the story does not end with his passing. Because the real question is not how a kingdom rises. It is what happens after it falls into other hands. After Suleman AS, the unity began to weaken. The strength that came from divine guidance started to fade. The discipline that held everything together began to crack. And slowly, the kingdom that once stood unmatched began to divide. History records the of regional powers. Forces rising from different directions. Ambitions growing. Conflicts forming. Among these emerging forces were the early seeds of what would later become known as the Assyrian expansion. A force driven by conquest. Control. Dominance. This is where the parallel becomes clear. When righteous leadership is present, power becomes balanced. When it is removed, power becomes a struggle. What happened after Suleman AS is not just history. It is a pattern we see again and again. A strong leader rises, builds, unites, establishes order. Then comes the transition, and with it, fragmentation, competition, power struggles. Look at the world today. Different regions, different powers, each trying to dominate, each believing they are in control. But history whispers something important. Every power believes it will last. Until it doesn't. Solomon understood this better than anyone. That is why, despite everything he had, he never claimed ownership. He always returned it back to Allah. This is the difference between power and arrogance. Arrogance says, "This is mine." Faith says, "This is a trust," and that trust can be taken at any moment. The story of Suleman AS is not just about miracles. It is not just about jinn or wind or thrones. It is about a man who had everything, and still remained a servant. And a world that, after him, struggled to maintain what he had built. So the real question is not what happened then. The real question is, what is happening now? Are we repeating the same patterns? Are we chasing power without understanding its weight? Are we building systems that will collapse the moment strong leadership disappears? Because if history has taught us anything, it is this: power is never the real test. What you do with it is. And what happens after you is even more important. If you've stayed till this moment, then you are not just listening. You are thinking. And that is rare. So take a second and connect with this message. Because stories like this are not meant to entertain. They are meant to wake you up. And if you want more journeys like this, stories that connect past, present, and future, then stay connected. Because the next episode will go even deeper into the patterns that shape our world.